Welcome to El Parenting Podcast. This is Amy,
Adriana,
and Jen. We'll share la locura and chaos on raising children. We'll cover a range of topics, including discipline, communication, education, health, and cultural traditions. We believe that parenting takes a village, and we're here to support you every step of the way. So grab un cafecito or wine, sit back, and join us for a laugh as we explore the joys and challenges of raising happy and healthy children. Today's episode is made possible by our fantastic sponsor, Blue Serenity Boutique. Are you looking to upgrade your wardrobe with unique and timeless pieces that truly stand out? Look no further than Blue Serenity Boutique. They're your one-stop destination, bringing carefully curated resort wear to everyday fashion. Visit them on Instagram, Blue Serenity Boutique, or on their website, blueserenityboutique.com. And of course, don't miss out on visiting in person at 258 Andalusia Avenue in Coral Gables. Make sure to tell them El Parenting Podcast sent you.
Welcome to episode 9 of El Parenting Podcast. We are super excited. As you know, we have our normal trio. This is Amy, and we have Jenny and Adriana. But today we are so excited to bring on Miss Rocio Garza. She's a content creator, and actually her and I met several years ago in 2017 when I decided that I was going to start embracing my curls. I do have curly hair, and I just said, I'm just gonna appreciate and love what grows out of my head. And at that time I started looking for YouTube videos and influencers and people who had more knowledge on this topic, and I came across Rocio's page, and she's just like a little cafecito. Like, she's so warm, and I started talking with her, and I feel like I'm talking to una prima. And also another connection that we have is that she currently lives in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and that's where I was born. Her daughter was also born in the hospital that I was born in. So we have a lot of things, a lot of common ground. We love LSU, go Tigers. So that's how we kind of connected. So I was so happy when she decided to be a guest on our podcast. So welcome, Rocio. Yay.
Thank you. Yay. I'm excited to be here. I was saying the other day, I kind of feel like I've been fangirling over the podcast. I really like what you guys have been talking about. A lot of the topics that y'all are bringing up, I think more moms need to hear, specifically Latina moms. And so I think that I kind of feel like y'all have touched on things that I can relate to. And so I don't feel alone in a lot of the spaces that I've been in, especially with this second baby. So thank y'all for the podcast, and just thank you for even wanting to talk to me, because that's
No, you're very easy to talk to, very relatable. So I guess part of the reason I reached out is because another common ground that we have is that we both Latinas. I've mentioned before, my mom is from Nicaragua. My dad is from Venezuela. We call each other cipota, which is a very Central American term.
Central American.
But we also married Americanos, right? Mm-hmm. Or little gringos.
Sorry. What is cipota?
Cuban Americans. Cipota is like
a little kid, but like a slang term for not really kid, but like hey, cipota, cipotilla. It's like
chick.
Yeah.
Okay. It sounds like a fruit, honestly. I like it.
Cipota? A fruit?
Yeah.
I've never thought of it that way, but yeah, I guess it does kind of ring like a fruit.
Yeah. So her and I also connected on that front, about being married to un gringo. And I call my husband Gregorio. I changed his name from Gregory to Gregorio, so, it is what it is. But, so can you talk to me a little bit about, how, when you met him, did the fact that he was gringo, you were like, oh my, what was walk me through how you guys met?
Well, we met on a dating app. I think in the time I was just very open to dating anybody who, I guess fit the description of what I was looking for at the time of who I wanted as a partner. So I first connected with him on Bumble. We matched on Bumble. And then I got tired of the app. I got bored, I would say, not of him, but of the app itself. And so then I hopped on Hinge and we matched again. And he was like, oh, well, we matched twice, so now we have to meet in person. As far as what I was looking for, I don't want to say I had a preference. But as far as things that we had in common, that's what I was more interested in. Did I see myself dating somebody long term or marrying somebody who was white? No, it wasn't something that I ever really, I guess, saw for myself in the future, you know, as I was beginning, I guess, my dating journey as a teenager or whatever. And, but yeah, you know, we matched and we had a lot of things in common, and everything just really escalated very quickly after we met. We started dating. Like the next month we moved in with each other. And then less than a year later, we found out we were expecting, we planned a wedding, and now here we are, you know, 2 kids later, living in Baton Rouge, which is also not a place that I ever saw myself living in. So I was actually raised in New Orleans, and New Orleans is a very big city, lively city. Miami reminds me of New Orleans, just more tropical and a lot more Latinos in Miami than in New Orleans. But New Orleans it's just a cultural melting pot. No, wait, what?
All I hear is crazy. Like that's crazy. The equal factor of New Orleans and Miami.
Yeah. It's crazy, but I feel like it's crazy in a good way. You know, like it's got so much culture. It's rich in just like diversity, and we have just every I guess nationality that you can think of. You'll find it in New Orleans, and I think that's what I really loved about the city, and I feel like it's something that has shaped me into the person that I am today. And so making the decision to move from New Orleans to Baton Rouge, which is where he's from, was very challenging for me, because New Orleans, as you know, not New Orleans, but Baton Rouge, it's very different from New Orleans. You know, although it's the capital and it is fairly large, it doesn't have, at least from what I've experienced in living here, it's not as culturally diverse. It just doesn't feel like a culture type of city. And not only that, but in the area that I live in, which is here in Central, I found it hard to find a lot of people that look like me, or to find a lot of people that, you know, were even of color. And so marrying somebody who was white, or just dating somebody, I guess at the time, who was white, and then being submersed into this non-cultural culture was really hard for me, and it felt isolating. And, you know, I come from a very large, loud, beautiful family that is always there, always willing to support, always willing to just, that's just the nature of how our family is. And leaving my family to live an hour and a half away, and then being part of a relationship where he's just not as involved with his family, it was just very hard. It was very isolating. It was very difficult. And then, like I said, we found out we were pregnant a year into our relationship, and that happened in the midst of the pandemic. So that was just even more isolating and a lot harder to navigate. So I did what I could to share, I guess, on social media, as we all did during the pandemic. And I think that I found my voice, and I was able to reconnect with other people who were, you know, Latina and new moms, and it just didn't feel as isolating, I guess, talking about that kind of stuff on social media.
Yeah. So as you know, our parents always have they're very open about their thoughts of who we date and all that. My parents, actually, I never really had an issue. I mean, I always was drawn to El Gringo, so there was no surprise from my parents. And so my question to you is, and this goes for, you know, all of us are married and things like that. So did you ever have maybe feedback, like, are you sure you want to go there? Like, did you ever have that kind of talk with your parents?
With my parents, no. I'll get into the conversation I had with my brother-in-law. But with my parents, I never did. They were very open about who I chose to be with, as long as it was for the right reasons and it was for love and somebody who treated me right. They were, you know, fully in support of that. Doesn't matter the race. Now, I did have some cousins of mine that they didn't have that same, I guess, receptiveness from their parents, and they weren't as open to who it was they dated when it came to race. But with mine, my parents were very just like, as long as he treats you right, as long as he's going to, you know, take care of you and love you the way you deserve to be loved, then we don't care who it is. He can be, you know, anybody. Now, when it came to, I guess, who they thought I would end up with, I did have a lot of cousins that were like, I just didn't think that you would end up with somebody who was white. My brother-in-law, I'll never forget, this was before I met Lance, and I was on the dating apps, and, I had just gotten out of a relationship, and he's like, well, what are you looking for in a partner? And I said, I don't care if somebody's going to treat me right. And I guess he, I don't remember exactly the words that he said, but it was somewhere along the lines of like, I don't see you. Maybe I had just gotten out of a relationship with somebody who was white, or dating somebody who was white. And he was like, I just don't see you with somebody who is white, because you're so pro Latina, because you're so like, for the people. And it just, in his mind, it just didn't fit. And I think my rebuttal was just like, I would love to be with somebody who loves me the way I deserve to be loved. Because I have been in good and bad relationships with men that are different races. And I don't think that it matters what their race is. They're going to treat you bad if they want to treat you bad, and they're going to treat you great if they want to treat you great. And so I was fortunate enough to find a man who loves me the way I deserve to be loved. And he just so happens to be white. Has that posed some challenges in these last couple of years? Absolutely. I think that when I had mentioned before that ideally I saw myself with somebody who was of the same race or culture, I think one of the main reasons was because I didn't want to have to explain so many things. I didn't feel like I had to.
Like what? I feel like you need to elaborate. What do you feel like you would have had to explain?
A lot. And I think each tier, I think, poses a different argument. If you want to talk about the very basic or bottom of the totem pole, I would say little things like music styles, or foods, or I guess like those little things, like the different kinds of tacos, different kinds of forms of salsa, and different like music, not food, like those little minute things, right? And then if you go above a tier, then it's just like the way we talk, like different idioms. Like I don't feel like I have to like sit there and explain what something means whenever we say it in this kind of way. And then if you go a little bit higher, then it's like I don't feel like I guess at the time I didn't feel like I had to sit there and explain why I feel so passionately about why Latinos were treated a certain type of way, or, in my personal experience, I can't speak for everybody, but from my personal experience, why I was treated a certain type of way, and just wanted to date somebody or end up with somebody who just got it, who just understood without there needing to be some sort of explanation. When I met Lance, I had shared that on our first date, like I hopped in his Jeep, and he had Bad Bunny playing, and I found that as a surprise, because to my understanding, he was just like 100% gringo, and that was it. Like that he had no ties to anything Latino related, right? So I was like, oh, okay, well, here, I guess he's open to my kind of music, and he had like a whole playlist going. He was listening to he had at some point Oro Solido playing, and I was like, how do you even know right? Like, how do you even know
Oro Solido?
Right? And it's like, on our first couple of dates, having him play, these different types of music that are throwback, but are like just, they're great songs that, we all remember growing up. And I'm like, how do you know about it? Oh, I like it. So it's like, oh, I like that you like it,
girl.
Kind of thing.
He did his research.
He liked what he saw, and he knew what he needed to do.
Looking back, I'm like, I wonder how much time he took to like find these top hits from like, the from the 2000s, and put a playlist Googled together before I actually got
Latino greatest hits.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that's actually what happened.
That's so funny.
Mm-hmm.
So you bring up a good point about. I know you said it in tiers, but I'm gonna go straight to tier 3, like the more serious things.
Mm-hmm.
So. For me, like sometimes, I mean, my husband, I say he's gringo by blood because he's like Latino, honorary Latino. Right?
Honorary Latino, yeah.
He speaks Spanish for the most part. He loves all our food. He's very well traveled, went to Nicaragua with me, like no issues. So the cultural side, like even though there was some explaining, he was so receptive to it that almost wasn't even an issue. But a tier 3 item for me, and I'll give an example. So when we announced to our extended family that we were engaged, I would get comments like, "Oh, estás mejorando la raza."
Oh, I've heard that one before.
Which means, for those of you who aren't fluent in Spanish, that means,
that makes me want to throw up in my mouth.
100%. Which basically means, you're improving the race. And to me, I would look at people and I would tell them, what's wrong with our race? Like, that's a very Eurocentric belief that Greek, because my husband is 6'3", he has green eyes, that like, I guess, ashy brown hair, whatever. And they would just look at me like, oh, like when I asked them, it kind of made them realize what they just said to me. So like kind of having sometimes those conversations would come up, or like when we would go at the time when his parents lived in, near St. Augustine, Florida, I would get looks, and it's like, those are the kinds of things that he never had to think about as a white person, So I definitely understand what you mean when you say like having certain conversations to have to explain things that they haven't had to live with, as minorities, right? So what about you, Jenny? She's also married to a gringo at the moment.
I'm going to tell you, ladies, you are super ahead of me I don't know how old you are, but when I connected with Bill, I was like 24, 25 years old. And I was just like, oh, I really like this guy. And, he's pretty amazing. I had zero thought process of he's American. Maybe I'll encounter some challenges. But throughout the years, because we've been together for 18, 19 years, the only thing that I can say that is still, I don't want to say a problem, right? Whatever word you want to come up with, is the loudness level. That's it. Like even Saturday, we had my cousin over and her husband and the 2 kids. And every 5 minutes, he's like, Jen, do you think you can lower your voice? I'm like, this is how I talk all the time. And I don't really even consider myself that loud. So everything else, he's the food aspect of our culture, he's super into that and loves it more than I do. Like, I'm the only Cuban American that does not eat rice, beans, and like picadillo once a week. I'm not into that, like, at all. But you can feed this man your typical Cuban Latin food every day for the rest of his life and he'll die very happy.
Same with Lance. Yeah. Lance is very big on Latin food. So my dad is Mexican and my mom is Honduran. And so when we started dating, he just thought that I was like, in the kitchen making tortillas from scratch and, just thought that was the kind of meal that he was going to get on a daily. And I'm just like, I'm sorry, that's not really, the way I was raised. But now, like I feel now that I'm a mom, it's like I want to, pass down some of these recipes that weren't all passed down to me. So let me do a little better, about it now. But yeah, he's really big on food. But as far as like, other little details like that, I had mentioned that we come from a very large family. And so even just like the family gathering aspect was something that was very hard, I guess, to navigate in the very beginning, because he couldn't understand why, for every holiday and then every non-existent holiday, but to our family, it's a holiday. He couldn't understand why we needed to all get together. So like for birthdays, why is it, why do we have to all get together? For holidays, why do we have to get together? For, just like a random Sunday when there's a bunch of leftovers, why do we all have to get together? And because we live an hour and a half away now, it was starting to become a problem in our relationship where he just couldn't understand why it was so important for me to drive an hour and a half away to have those leftovers with my family, or to have dinner or just to see them or just to spend time, because that's the way that I was raised. I was raised to just be involved, and to just have family all around. And so now that we live out here, and it makes it a little harder, I guess, I don't want to say like justify the drive, but it was challenging to explain that to him of what, the importance or why it was so important to me. I understand that it's not always the case for all Latinos, I can't generalize and say, oh, all Latinos come from a really big family and they want to be involved in their family, because I know I have friends of mine that they have different experiences, but that's my experience. And so explaining that to my husband, who is coming from a very different background, is just hard to see eye to eye on some of those things.
Okay, so I am currently married to Jenny's brother, so, but I was previously married to a white guy, to an American guy, from Gainesville, Florida. Mm-hmm. And some of the things that you're mentioning, I live as well. But I guess my question is, like, what about his side of the family and their reaction? Because I know, like, for this family, granddaddy, I love him, old man, old times, like different times, right? Like, he just was glad that I wasn't Mexican. So it was this thing of like, what does that mean, right? Because the assumptions like Latin people are all Mexican or, that's kind of thing. Like, there's other people. You're from where? You're Venezuelan? Mm-hmm. And it's like, yeah. And that made a difference because then I wasn't Mexican. So then it was, I guess, okay. Mm-hmm. So, was there any other, like, do you experience, I'm not going to say, like, racism, discrimination, but, like, what was their reaction, right? Because, he's bringing this Latina home, and maybe it was their first time interacting with Latin people that close, or, like, do you have, like, was that different, or?
So, my personal experience, I can't say that I've experienced that with his family, and I thank God for that. It's, and maybe it's attributed to the fact that someone in his family was married to, a black man, and they had, they have a child, and so the child is biracial. And so maybe that was their introduction already to an interracial marriage or relationship. And so it was just, I guess, fine and more welcoming for me. So I didn't experience any of that. Do I hear some side comments, some things here and there that have in the past rubbed me the wrong way? Yes. I don't think that I have addressed it personally because I don't want to, like, I know that they don't say it to mean any harm. Maybe it's just out of pure ignorance that what they're saying is just like not the right thing to say. I'm not a very confrontational person, so I don't think that I've had the guts, I guess, to say, hey, you know what, maybe you shouldn't say those kinds of things. I will give you an example. When my first daughter, Penelope, was born, somebody came over to the house and, was holding the baby and just like observing her skin color and was like, oh, no, like, she used the term darky on my baby. And I don't want to call it the postpartum hormones, because whether I had just had the baby or not, I'm sure that would have rubbed me the wrong way. And I did address it to my husband after they left, and he was just like, oh, that's just how she is. And hearing the words like that's just how she is almost like excusing them for making those kinds of comments. And I think that's where the problem lies in having an interracial relationship is both parties have to be willing to hear why certain things bother them, so that in the future, these kinds of comments aren't made, so that in the future, feelings aren't hurt because something was said that has to do with the color of their skin or their baby's skin or, something along those lines. So, yeah. I guess
we're thinking of ourselves and our relationship, but in reality, what we have to remedy, you have to remedy this now for the kids.
Exactly.
Because how are your children going to feel about that when they hear this story or they hear this person continue acting the way that they do? Because if we don't, because it's not like we don't want to call out people just to like try to prove that we're right. But my gosh, if I'm saying something ridiculous, then please tell me so that I can try to be a better person. Mm-hmm. But it's hard because I'm not confrontational either.
Yeah. Okay. So the microphone goes limp. Adriana loses her voice. Anyway, I was saying that I had the opposite. Actually, like my kids were born really, really white. So then the comment from my family was when I was going to have kids that were like darker. Like you. Sort of like, oh my God, your kids are so white. When are you going to have kids that don't burn? And I'm like, well, I don't know. And then I'm a Cuban guy, and my kids are still pretty white,
Mm-hmm. So I kind of had a mix of that, because my kids they pulled from both sides. And again, about speaking our truth, right? So I don't think they thought about who Greg would end up with, but I think there might have been an assumption that it was going to be a white girl, and then vengo aquí yo like, some sazon. Let me sprinkle some sazon over here. But when, you know, I have a son and a daughter, and my son has brown eyes, and my daughter has green. And we had this conversation about, I had to, again, to the explaining part, right? There is colorism in Latin America. Okay, so someone with green eyes who's Latino is considered higher up, right? On the totem pole. So, and I remember seeing this interview recently with Eva Longoria, where she has 3 or 4 sisters that are blanquita, they're, you know, more on the Anglo-looking side, and that she grew up hearing que she was la negra fea, right? So this is her explaining this, and like, she's stunning. So imagine hearing these things. So I had to make it a point because I was constantly hearing comments, oh, her green eyes, her green eyes, her green eyes. And I don't want my son to get un complejo, right? Saying, oh, because I don't have green eyes, I have brown eyes. Like, those are the things that they might not even think about. Like you said, it's not necessarily racism, maybe just ignorance of what exists in our culture. Yeah. And I had to say something. I'm like, can she see out of her eyes? That's all we should really care about, right? So, you know, it was like, and I made a point. I'm like, 0 comments have been made about his brown eyes. So obviously there is something going on there. So that had to be addressed, because I'm not going to have a child somehow learn to believe that there's something less about him because he doesn't have green eyes. So those are like little things that I think we face that might be micro, but they're not.
My second, Adriana, they said that your son's name is River. Yes, my daughter's name is River. So when she was born, so she's just a little more tan than Penelope, and that same person came around, and you know, like I was waiting because I knew, like I you know, just seeing River, I was like, oh yeah, she's a little more tan than Penelope. Everybody knew that, and I was waiting for that comment, and the comment came again, and you know, instead of me addressing it, I just told her, I was like, yeah, you know, like she looks more like her mommy, you know, like, and you know, we're not going to burn as easily, or, you know, just, I guess, like poking fun at what she was saying, hoping maybe that she would get the hint, but I guess I maybe she just didn't, because but that's the thing, maybe she didn't because I didn't address it the first time, and then the second time, instead of me still addressing it, I just kind of like poked fun at it, or just kind of like turned it into a positive.
But so it sounds like that's the best way that you can deal with it, because it's not fully your responsibility to fix this person. You know, give yourself a little grace if you haven't.
Thank you.
Yeah. And those conversations can be uncomfortable, even if, I mean, obviously, like, Greg has been the one to have those conversations. Like, that's your side, you fix it. But, you know.
Do you really feel that way? It's your side, so you fix it?
Well, here's something that my dad said this to me, and I thought it was good advice to deal with in-laws, and maybe it's not, I don't know, but it's worked for us. Like,
oh, tell me.
When if it's like Greg and his parents, they can fight like cat and dog, and the next day they're going to be okay. If I fight with them cat and dog, that mark is there forever. So if it's ever something with my family, I'm the one to voice the concern on both of our behalf, and then vice versa. So it's just worked. It's, you know, it's worked for me. It's worked for us. You know, because they're blood.
Bill doesn't talk to his family, so I'm lucky, you know, in some things and some things not. But I don't have to deal with in-laws or brother-in-laws or
on
like
purpose?
Nothing. Yeah, on purpose. He hasn't spoken to his family in like, I don't know, 25 years or something like that. So I only have to deal with my side, which is really only my mom and my 2 brothers. That's nothing. I can control that. He can control that, because Bill doesn't have a problem speaking his mind and telling him exactly, you know, how he feels. But I like the perspective. I'm glad. I think it sounds like good advice. I can see myself if I had that extra family where you don't want to mess with that. They're not going to forget it if it comes from you.
Right. I feel like that thorn would always be there, you know. But yeah,
well,
so
it's creating boundaries too, so your spouse to also be supportive and learn how to like create boundaries and also advocate for your family. Like you shouldn't have to be the one doing it on both sides, you know.
correct.
Yeah. And Adriana, she has like the best mother-in-law and the best sister-in-law on this earth. So it's like super easy.
It's super easy.
jealous.
Of course. I actually do. My mother-in-law is pretty amazing.
That's my mom.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, no, but I am honestly like my current mother-in-law is really amazing, you know. So I will second that. My sister-in-law too, you know. I've had actually even with my previous marriage, I had good sister-in-law, you know. The mother-in-law was a little bit rocky in some areas, but I think it's more like the Southern culture of just bless your heart. We don't speak about the things that bother us and everything. It's like you're walking on eggshells, so you don't know if they're offended or not offended, and they say everything with like a smile, and you don't know what the fuck is going on. So that was like that experience, you know, like you don't
With the
like,
first,
yeah, you know.
Okay.
So like the language was a thing, you know. So I would say something in Spanish. If I was talking to my mom in Spanish, they would take that as like we're talking about them.
about them. Yeah.
And they were like acomplejados. That was the thing. It's like they were acomplejados. And instead of like dealing with the situation, they would just like do remarks. And I would just like, oh my God, please don't. And I didn't want to deal with it. And then my husband wouldn't like deal with it either. So we just kind of chose not to deal with it. But, you know, she didn't mean it. It meant well. I think it's just the way that they were raised.
Yeah.
You know, it's the Southern thing that, you know, no confrontation, and they just, you know, are insulting you without insulting you. So you really can get mad because it's not like a real insult. It's like a backhanded thing, and you don't know how to respond to that. So, yeah.
But then that makes, I feel like, creating boundaries a little harder, because at that point, because you feel like you have to walk around eggshells when you know that there's a boundary to be had, like, how do you even address it at that point without offending, you know? Because it's not your intention to offend, but you can't control how they receive that boundary that's put into place, you know? Like with me, oh girl, where do I start? With me, you know, when I first met Lance, I had a really, in my mind, I thought I had a really great relationship with my mother-in-law, you know, like I was very grateful for her friendship at the time, because like I said, I was so far from my family that she was like the only family that I could really talk to about a lot of things. Now, when we had Penelope, our first baby, I noticed a shift very quickly in our relationship. And again, I'm not a very confrontational person. So I would swallow a lot of things and just like try not to say anything, because I didn't want to ruin the relationship that we had, because I knew that if I addressed things a certain way based off of what was addressed to me of how she reacts to things, I didn't want to get that kind of reaction from her. And so I would hold on to a lot of things. And I guess going back to the differences in culture, when I had Penelope, my mom and my husband's mom would alternate staying over the house to kind of help with the first couple of weeks after my C-section. And my mom was very, yo te ayudo. Like I will cook, I will clean, I will do laundry. Like I will do all the things to help you connect with your baby, because right now is the most precious time that you have with your newborn to learn all the things that you can. And if you need my help with that, I'm here to help you. And they would stay overnight, you know, and the baby would be crying like in the middle of the night, and I would just have to figure it out. There was one time where I think I was starting to develop mastitis, and I was really struggling, and I called for my mom to come help. And that was the only time that she came up to help me in the middle of the night with anything that was baby related. But other than that, it was more so like, you know, helping with things around the house that I just couldn't tend to. La suegra, on the other hand, was not really like that. You know, for her, her way of helping was, you know, let me take the baby, let me, you know, let me take the baby so you can get some rest, which in her mind probably meant well, like I'm doing what I can to help them get their rest so that they can function. I'm going to take the baby so you can take a shower. I'm going to take the baby so you can get some rest. I'm going to take the baby so you can have a meal or whatever. And again, I'm sure that she meant well, but I didn't receive it that way because I was just not used to having that, because my mother my mother and my family were completely different. There was one time in the middle of the night where the baby was crying, and she came upstairs to our bedroom and took the baby from my arms and was like, "It's okay. I got this. You get some rest." And I've tried to go to therapy for this to like see if I'm over it. And I still don't think that I'm fully over, that, because those are the first nights with my newborn, and I took it differently. So I don't know necessarily if it's a cultural difference, or maybe it's just the way that, each of us were just raised, I don't know if it's because I'm Latina and my family just, saw me as taking care of my baby the priority. But it's something that I felt crossed the boundary, and I had a hard time vocalizing that to my husband because he didn't understand where I was coming from and how I was raised, and how, these first moments with a newborn as a mom are just of the utmost importance. And I would see photos, of her doing skin to skin with my newborn. And those were things that I felt like, was a boundary that was crossed, and me lo tragué, and I just, it was one thing after another, and then comments about breastfeeding and all this that really affected my mental health. And I would vent to my husband, hoping that he would address these issues with his mom, kind of like what y'all were talking about, like I don't want to cross that line, because in a sense, yes, it's my family too now that we're married, but at the end of the day, it's your family, and I'm hoping that you're able to address it. And I think he was having a hard time maybe vocalizing these things to her because of how she reacts to certain things. And it got to a point where he was like, "Look, maybe you need to say something." And I was like, "Okay, I'll say it," So I eventually just purged all my feelings in a very vulnerable way. And I thought she understood where I was coming from, because she was very just like, I understand, and it's okay. You can talk to me about it, at any time. And I felt like the boundary was addressed and, made note of. And then we don't hear from her for like 2 months after that, because she was offended at the end of the day, because the wife had a problem with something that was done or spoken of about our parenting skill or style. And, it's hard. It's hard. I don't think that the fact that I'm in an interracial relationship, I don't think that is like, a pillar in when it comes to boundaries and in laws and those kinds. I think that it doesn't matter what our race and our culture is. I think that boundaries are just something to, I feel like it's hard no matter what marriage you're in, Yeah.
And I will say, I think there's also a component of the generations, right? Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of us, Jenny's mentioned that she's not confrontational. I've gotten a lot better at like speaking my mind, but we probably are a little bit crippled in that area because we were not allowed to do that, right? Mm-hmm. We were trained to zip it. You do what I say because I'm your mom or I'm your dad, right? Mm-hmm. So we never kind of flex that muscle. Right. So we're having to learn it now as an adult. And I think it's a lot harder now. But I also say that generation on the flip side is not used to hearing boundaries being set, because they're in the mindset of like, I'm the parent, you're the child forever and ever. Amen. And we do talk about that. Like the one thing my husband said in our one-on-one episode is like, one thing I want my kids to know when they're adults is that if there's something that I'm doing that's upsetting them, please let me know.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to whether, unintentionally or unknowingly hurt you or your family when it's as simple as having a conversation and me working on it. Right. Mm-hmm. So that's a kind of a shift that I think that our age group is trying to work on. But it's definitely, like you said, whether it's same race, intercultural, interracial, whatever, I think that's definitely something it's hard. I don't think there's an easy way to have that talk, but good for you.
No, because you know what? It's feelings and it's emotions that you're feeling as a new mom, and also how you want to raise your child. And I don't think that I don't think it's on our checklist once we give birth. It's like, oh, let me talk to my mom when I get home before she starts helping me with the baby so I can tell her, the rules, or our mother-in-law. It's not part of what we think about until it's almost like it's too late. And I can't imagine that anybody's going to come in trying to help us ill-intentioned, It's like she was probably doing the best she could, but that's not what you needed. And, who has the strength at that moment to be like, hey, by the way, that's not what I need. So it's hard, of course.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. Like when you're in that postpartum phase where you're feeling all of the feelings, it's like it's almost like you don't have the heart to address some of these things that at the end of the day are hurting you in some kind of way. Like my feelings were hurt by a couple of things that were said, and it wasn't their intention, at all. But I'm going through a lot, or at the time I was going through a lot of feelings. And so it's just like one more feeling on top of that I need to address. And it was a lot.
And it's like you almost don't even have the energy to even process it because you're sleep deprived and your body is physically recovering. And you bring up a good point about intent, right? Because sometimes even though we don't intend to hurt people, we can. And until somebody tells us, we don't know what we don't know, right? So it's, it's definitely a difficult relationship to navigate because they're family, but not, like you said, like yes, but no.
Yeah.
And after the 2 months, did everything come back to normal or repair itself or?
At the time it did.
Was this baby 1 or baby 2? I'm sorry, I missed it.
This was for my first baby. So, everything when it came to my first baby was new for me, and so I think that, there was also a little bit of a power struggle going on because she was essentially the primary mother figure when we were, when I moved up here, because I didn't have my mom here to really give much advice or anything. So she was like the motherly figure up here. And so I think that the power struggle maybe came into play when I became a mom. And, this is actually how I want to raise my baby. And I don't want to do it that way. And this is how me and my husband have decided to do things. And no, I'm sorry. Thank you for your advice, but we're actually going to go this route. So I think that was a struggle maybe for her. Currently, we don't have a relationship with her. Again, a boundary was set last year, and it was one that I and my husband together made. And, by him addressing it to her, this is how our family wants to do it. She did not like it very much. And here we are almost a year later, and she still hasn't spoken to us. So that's why I asked Jennifer if your husband not speaking to his family, if that was something on purpose, because with us, she hasn't met River yet, and that's something that really I see weighs heavily on my husband. And so I'm so grateful for my family and how large and open they are to, embracing Lance and understanding that he's just not as close with his family, especially now that there's no, open relationship or even open dialogue with his mom right now. So he sees, I guess, the family dynamic within my own family, and he loves that. Like, he loves that he's able to lean on a mother figure, on a father figure that, he unfortunately just doesn't have right now. And that's not by choice on his part, that's by choice on hers. And it's unfortunate, like, we've got a baby here that just...
Is his dad involved at all? Does he talk to his dad?
No, his biological father got into a really horrible car accident when Lance was just 2 months old. And so he's basically disabled, and his grandmother is still his caretaker. I think right now his role as a father is very important to him, because it's almost like he wants to prove to himself that he has everything in him to be a great dad. And so, I think that's why he's really appreciative of the relationship that he has with my dad. Like, my dad loves him.
Yeah. So
that's so nice that he can have that with your dad, because that's a lot. That's a lot of trauma to heal from. And then on top of everything, disconnecting in that way with the mom, even though it's not it's not his doing. But also sometimes time repairs. Bill's situation is different because that happened way before me. And when we met, he told me, he's like, look, I have zero interest in ever connecting with my family again. And I decided that I was just going to respect that I wasn't there to try to be matchmaker again and try to figure out really what happened. And like, I don't want to say I didn't care, but it wasn't my place, and I just let it be.
Yeah.
And Bill's just fine with my family. He's okay.
Yeah.
He's fine.
I think, going back to talking about generations, I feel like the more I talk to people, the more I hear that this kind of thing happens where there's such a disconnect, or like the parent pulls away or the kid has to cut them off. Like, I feel like that generation is burdened by pride. I
agree.
It's something their earth will shatter if they swallow their pride and say, my relationship with my child is more important than me being right. And I think that is such a crutch for that generation. I've seen it. We've seen, maybe not as far as not speaking for a year, but there's been scenarios where my husband goes weeks and weeks without talking to his mom because of the same thing. And the reason I asked you about his father is because sometimes my husband's dad was the mediator here, the messenger. But I feel like they're so crippled by the need to be right. And you do as I say because I brought you to this earth. And it's I feel like the parent and child relationship is no different than a relationship you would have with others. Like, respect is both ways, understanding and compromise and apologizing. Like, all of that is, I don't think we have, what is the word I'm looking for? We don't get a pass because we birth these children, right? So,
exactly.
That episode was getting good, huh? Well, it went so well that when we recorded with Rocio, we actually chatted for over 2 hours. So we decided to split this episode into 2 parts. In the coming weeks, we'll be releasing part 2 of this episode as we continue to discuss the joys and challenges of raising intercultural and interracial children. Stay tuned.
Thanks again to our sponsor, Blue Serenity Boutique. They offer a curated collection of clothing and accessories that cater to your every style. Whether you're dressing up for a special occasion or simply want to elevate your everyday look, they've got you covered. Make sure to visit them in person at 258 Andalusia Avenue in Coral Gables, or on Instagram, Blue Serenity Boutique, or on their website, blueserenityboutique.com. Disclaimer, this podcast does not provide medical advice. We're just 3 Latin moms sharing our story, hoping it will help you through your journey. Seek professional medical advice when needed.